The Trump administration put together what most people considered impossible peace deals between Israel and Israel's Arab neighbors. During that time, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, served as one of the main architects of what has become known as the Abraham Accords. CBN CEO Gordon Robertson spoke with Ambassador Friedman about his new book. But first, a quick look at what Friedman accomplished during his tenure. Ambassador David Friedman served during one of the most historic times in U.S.-Israel relations and historic developments in the Middle East. On May 14, 2018, Friedman presided over the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, a move decades in the making and what many thought could spark a regional war. Instead, peace broke out. Friedman played a key role in the development of the historic agreements between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco, the Abraham Accords. For decades, many said it couldn't be done without first solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Friedman and his team broke with that conventional wisdom and produced groundbreaking results. He reveals the behind-the-scenes maneuvering in his new book, Sledgehammer, How Breaking with the Past Brought Peace to the Middle East. From the Oval Office to the halls of power in the region, it's the story behind the Abraham Accords.
Well, joining us now is, in my opinion, the greatest U.S. ambassador to Israel we've ever had, Ambassador David Friedman. He's with us now. His new book is called Sledgehammer, How Breaking with the Past Brought Peace to the Middle East. And Ambassador Friedman, welcome to the 700 Club.
Thank you, Gordon. It's really such an honor to be with you. Thank you so much.
Well, let's talk about the book, and specifically, you've got a big word there, sledgehammer. Why did you use it as the title?
Well, you know, it was the metaphor actually chosen by the New York Times when we opened up what's referred to as the Pilgrimage Road. It's this incredible ancient discovery that connects the Pool of Siloam, which is where Jewish pilgrims would bathe before they ascended to the temple. It connects that to the Temple Mount, and it was this massive, incredible discovery. This entire road was found intact. It was built by Pontius Pilate around the year 30. It was undoubtedly the road that Jesus walked as he ascended to the temple when he visited for the three pilgrimages during the year. And so I was given at this ceremonial opening, I was given a sledgehammer to knock down this ceremonial wall. And of course, it was an incredibly moving event and a peaceful event from our perspective, but New York Times considered this to be highly provocative and referred to me going forward as a sledgehammer. So I chose to turn that metaphor around and I think explain how a sledgehammer, at least metaphorically, was actually what was necessary to solve the gating issues, many of the gating issues in the Middle East.
Well, you certainly broke with the past, and you had to fight your own State Department and your own Secretary of State just to honor the will of Congress in moving the embassy of the United States from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So it seems like a miracle today, but you actually got it done. So how did you do it?
Well, first of all, I think it actually was a miracle. People that assessed my qualifications often said, either I have insufficient qualifications, or maybe because I'm not a career diplomat, it's a good thing. But few people really understood that I approached this job with a deep sense of faith that I was put in this place. It was so improbable, so unlikely that I would ever get to this position, that I did sense that there was a certain amount of miraculousness to the entire process. So that was, I agree with you, it really was a miracle. Beyond that, look, I came into this being loyal to one person, to the President of the United States. He appointed me. And so all the headwinds that I encountered, whether it was with the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, I mean, once Pompeo came around, it was a whole different experience. He was wonderful. But Tillerson was very negative, and there were others in the administration who did not want to move the embassy, who did not want to bring the United States closer to Israel. And my response to all of them is, go tell it to the president. If he agrees with you, I'll follow his instructions. But I'm going to make a different case to the president. and I'm going to follow his instructions. I'm not working for any of you. I'm almost 60 years old. I've lived a life with a lot of experience. I'm not looking to get a promotion. I'm not looking to get a good report card. I'm looking to achieve things, and I want to achieve the president's agenda. So whatever the president decides, I'm going to follow, but I'm going to make the case to him why we ought to be moving our embassy, why we ought to be recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, why we ought to change our view as to the legality of Jewish settlements in Judea and Samaria, and why we can do all that and still make peace with Israel's neighbors. And so it really comes down to the relationship I had with President Trump and the authority and the runway he gave me to move forward on his agenda.
Well, let's talk about another miracle, which is the Abraham Accords. And here you broke with the previous administration. John Kerry, Secretary of State under Obama, actually came out and said there can't be peace with the other Arab nations until you first have a peace accord with the Palestinians. Well, you took a sledgehammer to that idea and broke it. So how did the Abrahams come about? Because it seems like you had to fight the State Department, you had to fight established wisdom, and others weren't even willing to try, and you succeeded.
Well, it began really with the move of the embassy to Jerusalem, because the first thing we had to do was to break that Palestinian veto. And look, we want to make progress in the region. We want Palestinians to have a better life. We can't be more pro-Palestinian than the Palestinian leadership, which unfortunately at this juncture ranges from being corrupt to being terrorists, depending upon which ones you focus on. So we had to end that veto, which they've exercised very effectively for more than 50 years, of, if they weren't on board, nothing moved forward. And by moving the embassy, the message we said was, look, the world's moving forward. The United States made a commitment to the State of Israel through the Jerusalem Embassy Act since 1995. It was endorsed by 425 members of Congress to move the embassy to Jerusalem. We're going to follow that because that's a commitment that the United States made to Israel, and it's a commitment that the president made during his campaign. And so the Palestinians began to realize that they didn't have a veto, and the world stood up and took notice, especially when moving the embassy did not result in any outbreak of violence. And we continued to show unprecedented support for the State of Israel, while at the same time, we stood with Israel, but we also had we had overtures to all these Arab countries. We became good friends to some of these countries. And I think what they recognized is that in this dangerous part of the world, what you really want is to be allied with the United States. Now, when they saw what a good friend we were to Israel, and a lot of them said, you know what, we want to have that kind of relationship with the United States as well. How do we become closer to the United States so that we can have that type of relationship? In all cases, the road led, at least in part, through Israel. We said, look, it's very hard for us to have this kind of relationship with you if you're going to be so hostile to our most cherished ally in the region. And so, through the U.S. sort of being the hub within a spoke of countries, all these countries came to view Israel not as a challenge, not as an adversary, but as an enormous opportunity and an ally. And it just really began with the U.S. taking in a principled, unapologetic stand with the State of Israel.
Alpha.